Hello and welcome to EvilGinger Miniatures role-playing review and our first and the second episode on Ars Magica. This is the bestiary that I borrowed from one of the players. This is the 4th edition bestiary. It's currently in 5th edition, but for reasons that I explained last week, players insist on playing 4th edition. So 4th edition we're playing. I'm currently, he says, fishing that off the floor where it had gone, looking for a main rule book for 4th edition, and I shall be scouring eBay for affordable versions of the hardback of the books, as I might have the PDFs of pretty much everything that's relevant, but I prefer the physical copies, especially given that all the PDFs for this rule set are very much printers PDFs, and they're not terribly useful as a player to have to scroll through things. You have to have things blown up to maximum, and then you have to roll up and down because it tells you important things about, information isn't fed to you quite as efficiently as you would for looking up, as you can look up in a book. And I have trouble remembering things if it's 4 screens up there and I'm having to scroll back 4 screens, and incidentally killing the scroll reels on mice. It would help if I could get my little iPad working, my little Android pad working, but I'm still having a fight with that at the moment, and I really can't beat. It's not a thing that I use, so I don't actually have to beat it. So it's gone on the back burner. It's currently sitting over there on the it's currently sitting over here on the big shredder, which I need to relocate because I don't use it all the time, and it's taking up office space, which I could probably replace with a rack for putting painting stuff in. But this isn't role playing. We're talking about Ars Magica, and I'm getting off topic. Stay on topic, young man. So basically, Ars Magica, I described it in the first episode, which I recommend you go back and look at, and I'll try and remember to put a card pointing at the first episode about it. Has several sorts of characters. There are the mages, which I described in the first episode, which are the principal characters, who are the subject of the game. After all, it's Ars Magica and it's about medieval wizardry, or wizardry in a very, very medieval world. If not strictly medieval wizardry, though the magic systems and the alternative forms of mages do actually nod to actual magical practice and gamify it. So if you've any interest in sort of real world magic and magic theory, you'll see that they've made an effort in that area. And this is from the people who later did World of Darkness, and it goes into a lot more depth in that, and it goes into quite a bit of depth in here. It's split off from the start of the World of Darkness, and you'll recognise many things I mention if you've played World of Darkness later. They're not necessarily in each other's future. They diverge, and as the editions have gone on, it's currently on the 5th edition, it's became more plainer where the breaks, where the 2 timelines went off in their different directions. There's not that much a mention of vampires in the original game, but they become a big thing in the World of Darkness, and they're sort of back worked into it, and you get Vampire the Dark Ages, which is set at a similar time to the core of Ars Magica, and Werewolf the Dark Ages and that sort of thing. So, and several editions of all of those games. So I don't think 6 yet, I think it might be only 5. But the thing I want to talk about particularly today are the other character types. Other than wizards, you have companions. Now, companions are non-spellcasting serious PCs. They're things like landed knights, serious noblemen, influential peasants, and they're fully formed characters. In the game, we've got a couple of knights errant of various ages, landless knights. We've got a merchant. We've got a merchant, and they're the three companions. But you can pretty much play anything as a companion. You know, a priest, a monk, a travelling tinker, a beggar, you know, interesting characters like that. But they are fully featured, and they have, barring the magic use, the same sort of options, or many of the same sort of options as the wizards. They're costed a little different in places because being certain floors have more effect on being a wizard or less effect on being a wizard, and obviously a non-magical person's ability to cast fire magic is neither here nor there. They can't. Whereas to a wizard, they could be stronger or weaker at fire magic or creative magic or that sort of thing. But again, there are virtues and flaws. The stat range is the same as for the wizards, i.e. -1 to +3, with higher than that available if you spend a floor and you've if you spend from your points for merits, and you get as many points for merits as wizards do. So you can pretty much have characters with mythological level stats if you want them. Don't have to, but you can shape them, and they can be a lot of fun to play, and you can be a lot more imaginative than you can necessarily be with a wizard, because the wizard obviously operates around the core of it, playing you know, using magic and using all the magic research systems. But basically you create pretty much any standard adventuring type with the companion system, and they would be a lot of fun to play. I have an idea to play effectively a thief if I ever get to play rather than run the game, and that sort of thing. There are also sort of not quite NPCs, which are called grogs. Now, they started off in first edition as basically being spear carriers. They were there to protect the wizard whilst the wizard did the serious magic. Magic, even combat magic, can be relatively slow to cast, and it all happens at the end of the turn. So after everything else in the turn has happened, like that missile has been shot, melee has happened, and that sort of thing. So the wizard is a little vulnerable. Also, because magic is affected by encumbrance and armour encumbers, generally wizards don't wear an awful lot of armour, if any, and they will, and they're vulnerable unless they've got pre-set up magic to protect them from that sort of thing, to physical attacks before they cast their magic if it comes to a combat situation. And a lot of magic is non-combat. It's investigatory, it's divinatory, it's all the other things you could do with magic which aren't fireballing people. The trope where the wizard is just about the fireballs and the lightning bolts, they can be, but they don't have to be. And you know, it's a world, and it's a world in which you don't want the church to call a local crusade against you because you have just fireballed half the county, because that was what you did, you know, to get your venture things. You know, there are consequences for using blatantly large amounts of magic. The other thing with companions is that they're generally more social than wizards, because they don't suffer any of the penalties that wizards have socially, because they're mundanes, they live in the world, whereas wizards, even the most socially adept of them, tend to not. They live in two worlds at best, or a separate world. But the grogs are but the grogs got expanded, and they're now bit characters rather than primary ones, obviously, but they are NPC hireling style level. So they get their own stat lines, they get their skills, they get their abilities, they get some virtues and flaws, but you only get 3, and they are generally not you can't, with the 3 points, get the big, really big ones. So you'd have say a bodyguard for the wizard who's quite tough and can shrug off wounds, or you'd have a lookout person, or a servant, or that sort of thing, or the occasional spy that gives them a bit of information. That's more a companion level character. So you've got that sort of thing. They're not unimportant, and they can be a lot of fun to play. And the current game has a situation where everybody has a wizard, everybody has a companion, and everybody has 4 personal grogs. And some of those are fighters, and some of those are not fighters, and some of those are, they're across the spectrum. And there are 8 grogs which are attached to the Covenant of Hog Hill, which are specifically combat related, but they are effectively the garrison. So they've got spearmen, you've got archers, you've got lookout people, and that sort of thing. So, and obviously we would create additional grogs for things like, if NPCs would be grogs in the first place. So if there's a kid who might turn into a grog at some point, who's the one that always turns up with the messages to say that something's happening. There's also another potential grog that comes from one of the adjacent villages, which is always the one that gets sent to guide people who can't find the place because there's something weird going on about the place, which I won't go into because at least one of the players is investigating what the hell is going on with that, and I'm not going to tell him the answer in this video if they watch it. And they will watch it because they're buggers like that, players, sticking their noses where they're not wanted, But basically, she'll probably turn into grog because she's just the kid that gets told off to do, these annoying strangers are bugging me, I've got work to do. You go take them where they want to go and whatever have you. So there'll be possibly her, and there are others, like there's a headman for the settlement at Hog Hill. There might be other people that they encounter, and they're very easy to stat up as grogs because you just do a stat line and give them the skills you think they should have as a peasant. You don't have to go into great detail, and a couple of lines of physical description and you've got the character. There's lots of those with the players. So say there's potentially 12 of them because there are now 4 players, and the Covenant can easily take them, but they shape the world, and they're easy sketched in characters, and of course they can be fully developed into companions should you need to. Sorry, I have an itch because I've been playing House Tetris and there's dust everywhere. House Tetris being, by the way, finding places for things from the beta site in the workshop and clearing the workshop of debris so I can find places to put them in. But when we're talking about companions and grogs, I have modelled some of them and they're not finished yet, but I'll give them a bit of a show as we're going on. This one, and there's a few more down in the workshop as well who are in the shiny stage. This is Edwin, who's a scout, and he goes ahead of the party with another one called Isabel. Is one of the few female grogs, because again, like the authentic Middle Ages, it's, to put it mildly, sexist, but you can still have people in potentially any role, given that the real world limitations. But that's Edwin, who's a scout, and as you can see, he's scouting. He has bow, he has long axe, and we'll be going ahead of the party to tell people, to warn them about what's going on. We have a cook. Now Edwin is basically a Victrix model that's been kit bashed. We have a cook here, which is basically Victrix bits attached to a folk rabble body. Now, folk rabble are huge compared with Victrix figures, but it's mostly the height. And Victrix figures come on bases, and the folk rabble just stick straight to the base. They just defeats to the base. So this one, they don't look out of place. They're sort of a similar sort of height. Where I want height, I've again used folk rabble with Victrix bits. That's the Victrix head and the hood's Victrix, and the belt clutter is Victrix as well. This is Tiny. Tiny is, as is the traditional lot in England, a big bloke. Think Little John style. I don't know what his actual name is, but he's just known as Tiny, and he's the carter labourer type, and they don't trust him with a weapon, so he's got a staff, which was modelled from bits and pieces of weapon shaft and tool shaft from the folk rabble. But that's Tiny. Then we've got a slightly older version of one of the NPCs. Now, he's been started up as a companion, but this is young Sir William, who is currently 11, so this is probably a teenage version of William. So this is probably sort of 15 or 16 rather than 11, but currently he is wandering around with the party and having a high old adventure for a kid. There's nothing serious has gone wrong yet. There are some other nameless ones here, like this guy who's a lookout, who's got a folk rabble torch, but he's mostly Victrix. And as I say, there are more downstairs, and there will be more when I get the descriptions on the player characters as to what their characters look like. So I will be modelling those up, and eventually we'll be using them in the game. At the moment, we're mostly using Theatre of the Mind, but there's been fairly little serious combat. There's been a couple of confrontations, and there was one combat where they ran into some fantastic creatures, and there was an exchange of arrows and sling bullets. But that could be done, because it wasn't a massive battle. It could be easily modelled in without the figures. Also are a couple of serious NPCs. I've got Junior, whose actual name is Winfred, except he never says anything. So he's never told anybody his name, so no one apart from his boss knows his name. But he's basically a verderer, a woodsman, think a rangery type, and he's the junior to a chap called Guthrum. Guthrum is old Sir William, who is down south with the King's Army at the moment, chief verderer, and he's an experienced veteran in his 40s and doesn't go soldiering anymore, but he's been left at home to look after help look after the manor. The manor is in charge of Sir William's wife, who I might do a figure for. I haven't decided yet, because I would like a Norman noble lady that's possibly a 3D print that I can print that one a bit bigger, so that will get printed a bit bigger, so they don't look out of place with the Victrix, which are for 28mm figures a bit big. I haven't got any 28mm figures to compare them to, but they are big and they are fairly chunky. What I did with Tiny to get him to look as bigger than the rest of the figures was I actually buried in that base is a base that I sawed off at the feet, one of the puddle bases you normally get on figures, and that gave him the extra height, so he looks like he's 6 foot something and built accordingly. But I've got Guthrum and Tiny. They will also be involved in the Banners of War Anarchy stuff, as Guthrum is one of elder Sir William's commanders during the Scots War, Indeed, his last fight was the war with Scots that preceded the anarchy breaking out properly. There are various other people that are wandering around that are sort of character figures, like this peasant with an axe, you know, just a tall axe. Another possibly Grog from the Covenant, who's a lookout or a non-combatant. Need to get some pigs, because again, Hog Hill is called for the hogs. Then you've got a lookout, and again, this one's not quite finished. I need to do some brass work on his belt, but he's a wealthier looking peasant with a horn and no weapons other than the scramasash or dagger that everybody wears and carries and doesn't really count as a weapon in the greater scheme of things. But there are other figures which could be used in a game, but may or may not be, like this guy loading a crossbow. You know, this guy would work as a bandit if they ever meet any. This guy's a knight on foot. Again, these aren't finished yet, but they're sort of late work in progress stuff. But again, I'm finding building it in, and there'll be buildings, and I've got buildings lined up from war bases and from Ceresia to do. And I will probably be doing a fortified manor, because again, they feature in both the wargaming part of the anarchy that I'm going to do and in the role-playing game, and again, physical representations of what's going on. I did consider doing those in 15mm just so I could, you know, use them as 3D maps, but I think I'm going to do them in 20mm, 28mm, because again, they can be used for both. Next episode of the game, the episode of the game should be the day that this goes to premiere, but it's too late for me to record what is going on, what went on in the game. But I am very definitely going to be doing a spoken journal of what's going on in the game, and I might get a background that looks Ars Magica, even if it's only a coloured blanket. I don't like green screens. I always think green screens look strange, and green screens are another techie thing I would have to work out how to use, and that's not necessarily going to be fun. And I might get people, if I can, my video editor to edit in the actual players talking about their characters. So again, we'll do some developments, and I think the next thing I'll do on Ars Magica will be the story so far episode, and then I'll do regular episodes to keep people informed. There's also other role-playing in the offing, but I'll talk about that probably next time when I have a better idea of what might be happening. Anyway, you've had probably 20 odd minutes of me now, so I'm going to call it there, because I've got to go through this video and make sure the sound is recorded. It looks like it has, but you can never tell. And then there are various other things I've got to do involving the setup, which I'm in the middle of setting up, and it may require me doing a lot of Googling. In order to get it done. I'm not an expert at video-y stuff, and I'm going to have to learn some basics. So that's all for me for now. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe, and share this around with your role-playing friends. I've been doing it for years, so might even be doing it a how to roll, you know, bits of GM advice. Because if there's a mistake you can make GMing, I've made it at least twice, and hopefully I've learned a lesson on that one. Anyway, take care everybody, and goodbye for now. Bye. Let me faff around and find my mouse. Bye.